everybody. We're back from a quick break and we are talking about supplemental essays. And I'm going to put one more plug in here for my seniors out there. If you have not started on your college essays, there is no time like the present. And I don't want to make you feel good about this. You are behind the eight ball. You need to start writing. This is not a test. Now is the time. All right, and the proof that now is the time is that not only are we talking about essays, we're talking about supplemental essays, which typically are not released until around August 1st. And joining me to discuss those is my colleague Jen Simons, who is also a former admissions officer at Barnard, at Connecticut College, at Northeastern, and at Tufts. So she knows what she's talking about because she's worked for 4 schools, 3 of which ask for supplemental essays. Hi, Jen.
Hi, how are you, Beth?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. Why don't we start with the very basics? What the heck are supplemental essays?
That's a good question. So if you are using the Common application or the Coalition application, it's very likely, or it's likely that a college will want to get more specific information from you. So think of it as you have the FAFSA for, federal aid, and then you have possibly additional questions through the College Board to dive in a little bit more distinctly. And so what the purpose of the supplement is, and it's set by the individual colleges, is if they want to create a more personalized experience than just the Common App question for the essay, the 650 word prompt, and then the general, what I call administrative questions.
Right, right. And just one thing that I could share is that when I was at Penn, we were transitioning into the Common App. And the reason that we didn't do it initially, or held off for many years actually, was because Penn had these very unique essay questions. And there was just a desire not to lose that element of the application. But the writing clearly was on the wall that when all of your fellow colleges who you compete with for students go to the Common App, you could get left behind. And so that was kind of why we did. And now that I'm on this side, I see the beauty of the Common App. And am happy that a lot of colleges are on board with that. Who typically asks for these and why? Why do they ask for them? We talked about a little bit more personalized, but I know you have a lot of insight into kind of how they craft the questions and what they're after. And that would be helpful, I think, to understand.
Who asks for them? Well, it's not just private colleges. It's not just public colleges. It's really there's no sort of rule or rhyme or reason. It's the colleges that want you to they want you to sort of explain yourself a little bit more in terms of sharing things that they think are not otherwise going to be exhibited in the application. However, there are also colleges that want you to know something about what's important to them. And so they're using this as a vehicle to learn more about you 100%, but they're also using the supplement as a way for them to tell you what's important to them. And I can give you specific examples. We can wait until the end if that's preferable, but I want students to look at the supplements not only as thinking about how they want to answer them, but what is the college trying to tell me about what they value?
No, give us a couple of examples of that right now. I think that's a good point that you're making.
Sure. So, this year's supplements, for example, like Boston College, the word Jesuit, comes up several times in all different questions. They want you to know that this is a Jesuit, institution. That's not true, for all of the religious institutions. Some places, I don't want to say downplay it, but they don't come right out and say, but BC says Jesuit. The questions have that in it, and that's great. They also, one of their new questions is, in 2020, we faced a national reckoning on racial injustice in America. That's the substance of one of their questions. They want you to know that that's important to them. You don't have to answer that question, but they're telling you that this is something that we think is important, and you need to think about this. Tufts, very similarly, one of their questions is, again, these are optional, you don't have to answer it, but where are you on your journey of engaging with or fighting for social justice? I think that that says Tufts values that. And
Right.
interestingly, on the flip side, you have an MIT, which is infamous for being, a very academically demanding place. They say, we know you lead a busy life full of activities, many of which are required of you. Tell us about something you do simply for the pleasure of it. So, what they're saying is, yeah, you're going to work hard here, but we also care about what you do for pure pleasure. And then I also think it's very interesting along the same lines, like Princeton says in one of their comments about their supplemental questions, there are no right or wrong answers. Have
Mhm.
fun. And I think that that's so interesting that a place like Princeton, again, another very, very highly selective, highly competitive place, lots of brilliant students. They're saying we want you to have fun with this. It's not so.
Mhm.
So I think that it's important to recognize and take them at their word, that what they're saying is something that they value.
Yeah, I think a great example of what you're saying, and if you read a question and you think, I can't believe they're asking that. Why do they care? They shouldn't care, right? We get that sometimes, often from parents. Why would they ask a question like this? Why do they care? I think the better thing is, if you don't like the questions they're
Yes,
asking, this is probably not a fit, right? For you,
absolutely.
or for maybe for your student, or depending on who has the visceral reaction to it. By the same token, I will sometimes send students to the Common Application to look at the supplements for a school from the previous year.
Mm.
If I am concerned that a school maybe isn't necessarily a fit, and I want to say, and I say, look at the questions they're asking and see how you react to it. Chicago is a great example of this, right? You get students who are interested because it's got this reputation and it's a great school, but it is a very specific school and experience. And if you read the supplemental questions and your reaction is, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I would even think about that, that completely blows my mind, or I'm not interested in that, then that tells you something about your fit with the school. And so your point is a really good one, which is that supplemental essays absolutely are there for you to show the fit, but they're also showing you, and you should never, ever, ever lose sight of the fact that you decide where you apply. Yes, they are going to admit you or not, but you are the one who decides which schools really make sense for you. And if the prompts send you spinning in a not good way, then that might be a sign that this is not a great school for you.
I actually never thought of that, like from the point of view as like for example an MIT admissions officer, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just speculating this, but they don't want kids on their campus. I mean, again, correct me, Stu, if I'm wrong, if you're hearing this, but I feel like they're saying if you don't get pleasure out of anything,
Right.
we don't want you here. We want you to work hard, play hard, so to speak. I don't know that that's an MIT thing, but we want you to also have fun.
Right. Well, they want students who are going to continue to do the pranks that MIT is famous
Yes,
for,
that's
right?
exactly right.
And
Exactly right. Yeah.
so when I see that genuine engagement and spirit and fascination, but fun with this, then I think that's an MIT student. And one of the reasons I think that is because they asked that question. So, yeah, I think what we're getting at here is that these supplemental essays are really important, but you also do need to be thoughtful about not only how you're going to answer them, but also like, why are schools asking this? And does it make sense for me? What they're getting at, does that sound like me? And if it doesn't, then maybe that's them trying to subtly let you know, maybe you should move on to a different school.
Right.
Something to think about. So, where you mentioned that students can often find these on the school's websites, I think in my mind it's a little hit or miss.
Yeah.
Ideally, they're available on all the schools' websites, but we all know that websites are, not all created equal. So, what's your go-to if a student has a list of schools and they're looking for the supplements? How do you have them access them
Oh,
typically?
yeah. What I tell students to do is you have 20 schools that you can add to your queue on the Common App.
Hmm.
And when you add them to your queue, and that doesn't mean you're applying to 20
No.
schools. We hope that you're not applying to 20 schools, but I always have 20 schools. I wish I could have more so I could look at the
Yes.
supplements in my queue. And so that's how you do it. You basically add them to your queue, you go to the Common App, you go to the coalition, and the answers will be there. I will put a plug to all the deans and directors out there to please put your supplements on the website, because it just makes it easy
Yes.
for us to access it. And you've worked hard on creating them. You should be proud of them. But literally just look at the Common App, for example, assuming that, most of the applications can be found there, and then add them to your queue, and then it'll tell you exactly what they want. And that's important. It's also, there for additional essays that you have to write for scholarships, things like that. So that's where you want to do your research.
Right. The one thing that I will say is that the Common App, they do a new version every year. And so unless the Common App is updated, the updated version should go live on August 1st, you do not want to start writing prompts that are on the old version of the Common App, because colleges do change them. Not all colleges change them every year, but a college could have the same prompts for 10 years and then poof, the year you're applying, they change them and you've spent all this time working on them thinking you had the right versions. Make sure you have the up to date. And that's why there are some colleges, we very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please keep doing this, where they will release the prompts earlier than they're available on the Common App. So if you're hoping like, oh, it's not yet August 1st, but we're hoping to start working on the supplements, you can go to the school's websites and see if they have them posted there. Or in some cases, you're going to just have to sit tight and wait until the Common App updates them. Yeah. Let me see. There were some other things I wanted to talk a little bit about. And I guess
Can I actually interrupt you and say one thing,
please.
because you mentioned University of Pennsylvania at the beginning of the session. I was very disappointed when Penn dropped their very specific essay
Yes.
questions, because often I would read them for the colleges that I was working at, which, as you know, were not Penn. And the one bit of advice I would like to give is that even though you can repurpose some of the information, certainly you're
Yes.
giving within these supplements, the colleges that have distinctive, specific to them supplements. I mean, forget about Chicago; that's its own special magic.
Right.
But the places like Barnard that say, if you could have, I think it's a meal or a conversation with a woman, who would it be? Like, you want to take the time, and it's hard for me to say this because you have limited amount of time, but you want to take the time to create those answers specific to the institutions. Now, obviously, to do that with the why Barnard or the why us, whatever
Right.
that is. Don't just cut and paste, like be specific about what that school offers. But I would also say that each school has its own supplements, and you should submit those supplements specifically to that school and work on the specific ones for the other schools,
Right.
and not sort of mix and match. Another good reason to reinforce what you started out by saying, it was a little scary, but I'll reinforce it, which is now is the time. Now
Yeah.
is the time. So get your Common App or your main essay personal statement done, and then start working on the supplements so that you have the time to make them unique and specific to the school that's asking for them.
Right, right. And you did mention that you can repurpose, and I do think that's true. What I will have my students do is lay out all of the supplemental questions they're going to have to answer and look for overlap. Sometimes some schools will ask almost the same exact question, and in which case it's totally fine to take something you wrote and have it work for the other school. But if it is a very unique answer to or a question for one school, the likelihood that that can be repurposed is typically slim to none. Maybe there are little pieces, like you say, of it that you can, but for the most part, it does need to be fairly specific to that school. And, the other thing I'll throw out there, because I'm sure you saw it every year, I definitely did, the Why This College essay, where they had forgotten to find and replace all mentions of the other college. That is really bad when that happens for two reasons. One, if you wrote a Why This College essay and all you need to change is the name of the school, it's a poorly done Why This College. And we will talk about those in a future podcast. We do every year, but we'll do it again. But also because just that's bad.
No, absolutely.
You
And
know,
I would even say when I was at Tufts in my information session, I would say if I can insert the name of any other college or university into this why Tufts, you've not done a good job, because there are lots of schools in the Boston area. There are lots of schools that have, biology. I mean,
right. Yeah. Exactly. It needs to be specific. And you also just, typos on their own, no big deal. I will say this, when I was reading at Penn, when we were still reading on paper, I would, if I started to see a number of typos, I would start to circle them. And, if you had 10, that to me, not good, or like a lot of circles on the page. One typo, no big deal. And people get themselves so wigged out about a typo. I would worry less about the typo and more about that kind of sloppiness where you're not trying hard, where this is good enough. That is way worse than, a small typo or two that you have on an essay.
I don't want to see any typos, Beth. I'm going to totally disagree with you. Isn't
Yeah,
that terrible? I mean,
they happen. I think the point is they happen. Like, no one's perfect, and you can read over something 10 times and just your eye can skip over, which is why we do always recommend you have one other person read it purely from the typo perspective, not to offer their opinion, not to like weigh in on what you should change, more just, have I misspelled anything? But, I mean, did you ever not admit a student because of
never.
one typo on an
Oh,
I?
no, no,
That's
no.
my point.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
my point, right? You notice it, you don't like it, but it would never be a factor. You would never bring that up in the committee room. So, anyway, you're tough, Jen. Um, Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you joining us. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for joining us today. Next week, Ian is here, and he is going to be sharing another story from our team. So one of my colleagues is going to join and talk about her journey through college, what she focused on, and why. We're also going to be answering your questions. So if you have questions, please send them to us, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. You could also post them on Facebook. You could post them on Instagram or at College Coach BH, or you could post them on my page at Elizabeth Heaton 92. Also, if you love this podcast and you want to let other people know what a great podcast this is, we hope you think it's great. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more we get, the easier it is for people to find us. So please give us a review, and I hope it's a good review if you take the time to do a review. And last thing is that if you are interested in learning what we've covered, or if there's something that you're really interested in learning more about, we blog about every podcast. So you can go to our blog and search there, blog.getintocollege.com, and you will see the day and time that this aired, and you can click on it and listen to the podcast. And don't forget, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.